Blood streams down Noah's face as armed guards surround him. The blind child in his arms whimpers while the billionaire father screams accusations of kidnapping. Noah realizes saving this white boy's life might cost him his own. Sometimes kindness becomes your death sentence. Before I dive into this heartbreaking story of courage and prejudice, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button and like this video if you believe acts of kindness should be celebrated, not punished. Now let's discover how a homeless black teen and a blind billionaire's son crossed paths and changed each other's lives forever. Noah Jackson had been invisible long before he became homeless. At 17, he knew exactly how it felt to be looked through, rather than seen to be avoided, rather than acknowledged to be feared, rather than understood. The streets of Atlanta had become his unwelcoming home 3 months ago, when his uncle Marcus threw him out following the death of his grandmother, the only person who had ever truly loved him. The memory of that night still burned fresh in his mind. The alcohol on his uncle's breath, the stinging slap across his face, and the words that cut deeper than any physical blow, "You nothing but a burden boy. Just like your no-good daddy." Noah now called an abandoned building on the south side, his temporary shelter sharing the crumbling space with 4 other homeless teens who, like him, had fallen through the cracks of a system that seemed designed to fail them. Each day was a struggle for survival, a constant search for food safety and the basic dignity that most people took for granted. He worked whatever odd jobs he could find collecting cans for recycling, helping unload trucks behind restaurants in exchange for leftover food, or sweeping storefronts for loose change. But even these meager efforts to survive were fraught with danger. Just last week, Officer Brennan had stopped him for suspicious behavior while he was simply walking down the street with a bag of aluminum cans. "What you got in there, son?" "You stealing from these nice folks," the officer had demanded, dumping Noah's day's work onto the sidewalk while ignoring his protests. The only place Noah felt any sense of welcome was at the South Side Community Center, where Miss Packett's Pauline Johnson, an elderly black social worker with kind eyes and an unwavering spirit, tried her best to help kids like him. "You're too smart to be on these streets, Noah," she'd tell him, repeatedly, pushing application forms for GED programs across her desk. "Your situation is temporary, but education is forever." Noah had been a straight-A student before his life collapsed, with a particular talent for mathematics and art. He still carried a tattered notebook where he sketched designs of buildings, imagining himself as an architect, creating spaces where people felt safe and valued. Today had started like any other day, with Noah washing up in a public bathroom, his stomach growling with hunger as he counted the $4.27 in his pocket. He decided to spend $1 on a small coffee at the convenience store on Piedmont Avenue, hoping the caffeine would help quiet the hunger pangs until he could find something more substantial. The moment he pushed open the door to Quick Stop, he felt the security guard's eyes on him, tracking his every move like he was a predator rather than a hungry teenager. Thomas Reed was notorious among the black youth in the area, taking particular pleasure in harassing them regardless of whether they had done anything wrong. Noah kept his head down, avoiding eye contact as he made his way to the coffee station. He filled the smallest cup available and carefully counted out exact change, placing it on the counter for the cashier. As he turned to leave, Reed stepped directly into his path, his hand resting meaningfully on his taser. "Empty your pockets, boy," he demanded loudly, causing every customer in the store to turn and stare. Noah's face burned with shame, but he knew from bitter experience that protesting would only make things worse. Silently, he turned out his pockets, revealing nothing but his meager remaining money and his prized pencil. Reed smirked, disappointed at not finding an excuse to call the police. "Move along then," he said, as if he were showing great mercy. Outside, Noah's friend Darius was waiting, shaking his head in sympathy. Darius was 19 and had been homeless for over 2 years after aging out of foster care. "Man, you gotta stay away from North Side," Darius warned him, referring to Atlanta's wealthy neighborhoods. "Black kids like us, they see us up there, they call the cops before we even blink. Especially with all these missing kids reports lately. They think every black teen is up to no good." Noah nodded, knowing his friend was right. The invisible boundaries of Atlanta were as real as any physical barrier marking where people like him were and weren't welcome. After finishing his coffee, Noah headed toward the recycling center with Darius hoping to earn a few dollars. On their way, the sky began to darken ominously, the air growing heavy with the promise of a storm. The weather forecast had predicted severe thunderstorms, possibly the worst Atlanta had seen in years. "We better find shelter soon," Darius said, eyeing the blackening clouds. "I'm going to head back to the building." "You coming?" Noah shook his head. "I'm going to check behind those shops on Peachtree first. Rich folks throw away good stuff when it rains." Darius looked skeptical but didn't argue. "Your funeral, man. Don't stay out too long." As Noah made his way toward the upscale shopping district, the first fat raindrops began to fall. He quickened his pace, hoping to check the dumpsters behind the luxury boutiques before the downpour began in earnest. That's when he saw him, a small boy, no more than 7 or 8 years old, wearing clothes that probably cost more than Noah had seen in months. The child was standing alone on the sidewalk, his hand outstretched, feeling the raindrops as they fell. Most disturbing was how close he was to the busy street, where cars were speeding up to beat the impending storm. There was something odd about the way the boy moved, his head tilted slightly, not looking at anything in particular. With a jolt of realization, Noah understood the boy was blind, and completely alone in a rapidly deteriorating storm. The choice that would change both their lives forever was made in that instant before Noah could even consider the consequences. Lucas Pierce had been born into a world of privilege that most could only dream of, yet his golden cage was often just as confining as Noah's poverty. At 7 years old, Lucas navigated his world through touch, sound, and smell, having lost his sight to a rare genetic condition shortly after birth. His father, Victor Pierce, ruled Pierce Innovations from his fortified estate known as Goldcrest, a 20-acre property that stood as a monument to wealth and isolation on the highest hill of Atlanta's exclusive North Side. The mansion itself sprawled over 15,000 square feet of marble glass and rare woods, surrounded by meticulously maintained gardens that Lucas could smell but never fully appreciate. On this particular afternoon, Lucas had accompanied his nanny Caroline to Peachtree Mall, a monthly excursion he both anticipated and dreaded. He loved the sounds and smells of the outside world, so different from the sterile perfection of Goldcrest. But these trips inevitably ended with Caroline's tight grip on his hand, her constant reminders to stay close and be careful, making him feel more like a burden than a child. They had been at the food court when Caroline's phone rang. "Lucas, stay right here, sweetheart. I need to take this call." "It's important," she had said, placing his hand on the edge of the table before stepping a few feet away. Lucas had nodded obediently, but as minutes passed and Caroline's voice grew increasingly agitated in what sounded like an argument with her boyfriend, he began to feel anxious. The noise of the mall pressed in around him, disorienting in its chaotic jumble. He slid from his seat, intending to find the restroom just a short distance away, confident he could manage the familiar route. But a passing group of teenagers bumped into him, spinning him around, and suddenly Lucas had no idea which direction he was facing. Panic rising, he had moved forward cautiously, hoping to find a wall or something familiar to orient himself. Instead, he had somehow wandered through a service corridor, following the sound of voices, until he found himself outside the humid air, a shock after the air-conditioned interior. By then, he was completely lost. Back at Goldcrest, Lucas's father, Victor, was oblivious to his son's predicament, buried in his 40th floor office at Pierce Tower downtown, focused on the company's upcoming product launch and the discrimination lawsuit that threatened to tarnish his reputation. Victor Pierce had built Pierce Innovations from a small tech startup to a multi-billion-dollar empire through ruthless determination and a complete disregard for anything he considered weakness. His new wife, Stephanie, had been carefully selected for her beauty, social connections, and willingness to play the perfect corporate spouse. What Victor hadn't anticipated was Stephanie's barely concealed contempt for her blind stepson. To Stephanie Pierce, Lucas was an embarrassment, a flaw in the otherwise perfect image she worked tirelessly to maintain. He drags his hands all over everything she'd complained to Victor just that morning. "The Hamilton dinner is next week, and he'll embarrass us again." Victor had merely grunted, in response his attention fixed on his tablet. Lucas's blindness had always made him uncomfortable, a reminder of his late first wife Eleanor and the genetic condition she had unknowingly carried. Eleanor had died when Lucas was just 3, leaving Victor with a child he didn't understand and didn't particularly want to. He provided everything money could buy: therapists, specialists, the best schools, cutting-edge assistive technology. But the one thing Lucas truly needed, a father's love, remained perpetually out of reach. The staff at Goldcrest walked on eggshells around the child, following Stephanie's unspoken directive to keep him contained, quiet, and most importantly, out of sight when important guests were present. The Pierce family's attitude toward those they considered beneath them extended far beyond their treatment of Lucas. Victor Pierce's company had a long, carefully hidden history of discrimination against black employees, promoting whites at disproportionate rates and relegating black workers to lower-paying positions regardless of qualification. The current lawsuit, filed by former executive Marcus Johnson, alleged systematic racial discrimination and a hostile work environment. Victor had instructed his team of high-powered lawyers to make it go away at any cost, concerned only with the potential damage to the company's stock price. Goldcrest itself operated like a fortress, with security chief Warren Hayes, a former military contractor with barely disguised racist views, running the property like a military installation. The entire estate was surrounded by a 12-foot decorative but highly effective iron fence, with state-of-the-art surveillance cameras monitoring every approach. Hayes had personally overseen the arrest of several black pedestrians who had made the mistake of pausing too long near the property, declaring them suspicious characters to the responding police officers. Just last month, Stephanie had hosted a charity gala for disadvantaged youth at Goldcrest, a carefully orchestrated photo opportunity featuring a handful of carefully selected children brought in to pose with the beaming socialite. "Don't they look happy?" she had gushed to the society photographer. Later, she'd complained to her friends about having to sanitize the place after the event. "I swear I could still smell them on the furniture," she'd laughed, champagne flute in hand. Now, as the storm clouds gathered over Atlanta, neither Victor nor Stephanie had any idea that their son was lost and afraid. Caroline, panicking upon discovering Lucas missing, was frantically searching the mall, too terrified of losing her job to alert security or call her employers. Meanwhile, Lucas wandered farther away, his small hands outstretched in the unfamiliar space, the first heavy raindrops falling on his upturned face. In his expensive clothes and with his obviously vulnerable condition, he made an easy target in a city where desperation often overwhelmed compassion. It was precisely this desperate vulnerability that caught Noah's attention as he watched the small boy from across the street, thunder rumbling ominously overhead. The sky opened up without warning, unleashing a torrent that transformed Atlanta's streets into rushing rivers within minutes. Emergency alerts blared from phones all around as the National Weather Service issued flash flood warnings for the entire metro area. Noah stood frozen for a moment, rain soaking through his thin t-shirt, as he watched the blind boy tilting his face toward the downpour, clearly disoriented and frightened. Pushing aside his own concerns about approaching a wealthy white child, Noah crossed the street quickly, stopping a few feet from the boy to avoid startling him. "Hey there," he called over the roar of the rain. "Are you lost? Do you need help?" The child flinched, turning toward Noah's voice with a mixture of hope and fear on his face. "Who's there?" he asked, his voice small but surprisingly composed for someone so young. Noah took a careful step closer. "My name's Noah. I noticed you standing alone and thought you might need some help. It's starting to flood, and it's not safe out here." The boy's hands fidgeted with the strap of his small backpack, his unseeing eyes directed somewhere past Noah's shoulder. "My nanny says I'm not supposed to talk to strangers, especially dangerous people." There was something in the way he said "dangerous people" that made Noah's stomach tighten, recognizing the coded language often used to describe people who looked like him. Still, the child was in obvious danger, and Noah couldn't just walk away. "I understand being careful," Noah said gently. "But right now, this storm is the most dangerous thing around. I just want to help you get somewhere safe. Are your parents nearby?" The boy shook his head, droplets flying from his soaked hair. "I got lost at the mall. "I don't know where Caroline is. Caroline is your nanny." The boy nodded. "What's your name?" Noah asked, moving slightly closer as lightning cracked overhead. "Lucas," the boy replied, flinching at the thunder that followed immediately after. "Lucas Pierce." Noah's heart sank. Even he recognized that name. Pierce as in Pierce Innovations, as in billionaire Victor Pierce, whose face regularly appeared on business magazines and whose reputation for ruthlessness was legendary. This wasn't just any lost child, this was quite possibly the worst person Noah could be found alone with in the entire city. "Okay, Lucas," Noah said, forcing his voice to remain calm. "I can see you're blind. I want to help you get home, but I need to know where you live." Lucas shivered, his expensive clothes now thoroughly soaked. "I live at Goldcrest. It's the big house on Peachtree Hill," great Noah thought. The fortress on the hill, in the heart of the whitest, wealthiest neighborhood in Atlanta, where someone like him would be seen as a threat just for existing. Noah pulled out his phone, intending to call emergency services, but the no-service message mocked him. The storm had apparently overloaded the cell networks. "Lucas, do you have any identification with you? Something with your address or a phone number?" Lucas nodded, pulling at a medical bracelet on his wrist. "This has my information, but I can't read it." Noah gently took the boy's wrist, squinting at the metal plate. It contained Lucas's name, a note about his visual impairment, and what appeared to be part of an address, though rain had made some of it illegible. As Noah tried to make out the details, his attention was diverted by the sound of rushing water. Looking up, he was alarmed to see that the street was now ankle-deep and rising rapidly. A car floated past its alarm, still blaring, showing just how quickly the situation was deteriorating. "We need to get to higher ground," Noah said urgently. "This whole area is going to flood." As if to punctuate his warning, emergency sirens began to wail in the distance. Lucas's face crumpled with fear. I can't breathe right," he gasped, his breaths coming in short, painful wheezes. "My inhaler, I need my inhaler." Noah watched in alarm, as the boy fumbled with his backpack, his hands shaking too badly to open it. "Let me help," Noah said, taking the bag and quickly locating the inhaler inside. He placed it in Lucas's hand, guiding it to the boy's mouth. After 2 puffs, Lucas's breathing eased somewhat, but he still looked dangerously pale. "Do you have a phone?" Noah asked. "Maybe we could call your dad." Lucas shook his head. "Caroline holds my phone. She says I might break it." Noah made a split-second decision that he knew might cost him dearly. He couldn't leave this child alone in a life-threatening flood, but helping him meant entering neighborhoods where his mere presence would be considered suspicious. Taking him all the way to Goldcrest meant potential accusations of kidnapping. "But what choice did he have, Lucas?" "I'm going to help you get home," Noah said firmly. "But the water's rising fast. I'm going to have to carry you, okay? Is it all right if I pick you up?" Lucas hesitated, then nodded, reaching out tentatively. Noah lifted the small boy, easily settling him on his hip. "Hold on tight, okay? I'm going to find us a safe path." As they moved toward higher ground, Noah couldn't help wondering, what price would he pay for this act of basic human decency? Would you help a child in danger, even if you knew society might punish you for it? Comment number 1, if you believe Noah is doing the right thing, or number 2, if you think he should have found another way to help. Like this video if you've ever been judged unfairly based on appearances, and subscribe to hear what happens next. Will Noah be seen as a hero or a criminal as he carries Lucas through the dangerous flood? Will Lucas's family be grateful or suspicious when a young black man shows up with their son? Let's continue this incredible journey of provocative courage against prejudice. The rain fell in sheets so dense that Noah could barely see 10 feet ahead as he carried Lucas through the flooding streets. The boy clung to him tightly, his small body trembling from cold, and fear his face buried against Noah's shoulder. Water had risen to Noah's knees in some areas, the powerful current threatening to sweep them both away with each cautious step. They had been moving for nearly 20 minutes, following what Noah hoped was the most direct route toward Northside, when the wail of a police siren cut through the storm's roar. Red and blue lights pulsed through the curtain of rain, and Noah's heart plummeted. A patrol car had pulled alongside them, its spotlight now trained directly on Noah's face, temporarily blinding him. "Set the child down and step away with your hands where I can see them," a voice commanded through the vehicle's loudspeaker. Noah froze, acutely aware of how the situation must appear to the officer. A young black male carrying a white child through a storm. "Sir, this boy is lost. He needs medical help." Noah called back, not moving. "He's having trouble breathing." The patrol car door opened, and Officer Benson emerged, one hand resting meaningfully on his holstered weapon. He was middle-aged, white, with the hard eyes of someone who had already made up his mind about what he was seeing. "I said, put the child down. Now." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Noah carefully set Lucas on his feet, but kept a steadying hand on the boy's shoulder. "Tell the officer who you are," he said quietly to Lucas. Lucas turned his head in the general direction of the officer's voice. "I'm Lucas Pierce. I got lost at the mall. Noah's helping me get home. I can't breathe good." At the mention of the Pierce name, Officer Benson's demeanor shifted slightly, though his suspicion remained evident. He approached cautiously, shining his flashlight directly into Lucas's face, noting the boy's unfocused eyes and labored breathing. "Pierce," as in Victor Pierce, he asked, his attention now divided between assessing the child's condition and keeping a wary eye on Noah. Lucas nodded, then doubled over in a fit of coughing that left him gasping for air. "He needs his inhaler again," Noah said urgently, already reaching for the backpack he'd been carrying. Officer Benson tensed his hand, moving back to his weapon. "Don't move," he snapped. Noah froze, water swirling around his legs. "Officer, please. His inhaler is in this bag. He's having an asthma attack." For a terrible moment, Noah thought the officer would refuse, out of sheer prejudice, but Lucas's increasingly desperate wheezing finally prompted him to action. Slowly, he instructed, watching, as Noah retrieved the inhaler and helped Lucas use it. As the medication took effect, Officer Benson radioed in, requesting an ambulance and reporting that he had located the Pierce boy. The response came back garbled, but clear enough no emergency vehicles could get through the flooded streets in that area. The officer cursed under his breath, then fixed Noah with a hard stare. "What's your involvement in this? How did you end up with him?" Before Noah could answer, Lucas spoke up, his voice stronger after using the inhaler. "I was lost. Noah helped me. He's taking me home to Goldcrest." Officer Benson's expression remained skeptical as he addressed Noah. "ID." Noah carefully reached into his back pocket, producing his water-damaged state ID card. The officer examined it, his face revealing his thoughts as clearly as if he'd spoken them aloud. Young black address in one of the poorest neighborhoods. Every box on the officer's mental checklist of suspicious was being ticked. "Noah Jackson," he read aloud. 17. He handed back the ID with obvious reluctance. "I should take the boy myself, but my vehicle can't get through these floodwaters to Northside." He seemed to be weighing his options, none of which he liked. Finally, he made a decision. "You continue getting him to safety, but you call this in the minute you reach a functioning phone." He scribbled his badge number on a waterproof notepad and tore off the sheet, handing it to Noah. "Ask for me specifically, Officer Benson. And Jackson, if anything happens to this boy, I will personally make sure you regret it for the rest of your life." The threat hung between them, explicit and unmistakable. Noah nodded, understanding perfectly what remained unspoken. A black teenager would be automatically assumed guilty if anything went wrong. "Yes, sir." The officer returned to his vehicle, presumably to continue emergency response duties. Though Noah noticed, he drove slowly alongside them for several blocks before finally turning onto another street. With Lucas securely in his arms once again, Noah continued their difficult journey. The water level had begun to recede in some areas as they moved to higher ground, but the storm showed no signs of abating. Lucas had grown quieter, conserving his energy, but his breathing remained worryingly labored. They needed to find shelter, at least temporarily. Ahead, Noah spotted the distinctive shape of a church steeple rising above the surrounding buildings. Churches were often opened as emergency shelters during disasters, and even if this one wasn't official, surely they wouldn't turn away a sick child. As they approached the red brick building, Noah was relieved to see lights glowing behind stained glass windows. He carried Lucas up the steps and pounded on the heavy wooden doors. Long moments passed before the door opened, a crack, revealing the suspicious face of an older white man in clerical collar. "We're full up," the man said, immediately beginning to close the door. "Please," Noah called desperately. "Not for me. For the boy. He's sick." The door paused, then opened wider as the pastor's eyes fell on Lucas. "Bring him in," he said, his tone markedly different. Inside, the church's fellowship hall had been transformed into a makeshift shelter with perhaps 30 people huddled on pews and folding chairs. Most were white, and many openly stared, as Noah carried Lucas to a vacant bench near a heater. An elderly woman who identified herself as a retired nurse came forward to examine Lucas, confirming what Noah already knew: the boy needed proper medical attention soon. "His asthma's being triggered by the stress and cold," she explained. "Keep him warm and try to keep him calm. If his breathing gets worse, he'll need emergency services." Noah thanked her, then turned his attention to Lucas, who seemed both exhausted and frightened. "We'll rest here for a little while," he told the boy gently. "Then continue when you're feeling stronger." Lucas nodded, his small hand finding Noah's. "Are you an architect?" he asked unexpectedly. Noah was startled by the question. "No." "Why do you ask that?" "Your notebook," Lucas explained. "In your backpack. I felt it when you were carrying me. It has lots of drawings, right? My tutor says architects make drawings of buildings." Noah was surprised by the boy's perceptiveness. "They're just sketches, ideas. I'd like to be an architect someday, though. My dad says buildings tell stories." Lucas offered. "He owns lots of them, but I think he only cares about the money stories." There was a simplicity to Lucas's observation that cut straight to the truth. "What kind of buildings would you design?" the boy continued, genuinely interested. For the next half hour, as the storm raged outside, Noah described his ideas for sustainable community centers, affordable housing with green spaces and schools, designed to maximize natural light and creative thinking. Lucas listened attentively, asking surprisingly insightful questions for a 7-year-old. In turn, Lucas shared details of his isolated life at Goldcrest, where he was largely raised by a rotating staff of nannies, tutors, and specialists. "Dad's always working," he explained matter-of-factly. "Stephanie doesn't like me touching things. She says I leave smudges." The casual way he described his stepmother's cruelty made Noah's chest tighten with anger. Their conversation was interrupted when Lucas's breathing suddenly deteriorated again, his words giving way to frightening gasps. The retired nurse hurried over, her expression grave as she listened to his lungs. "He needs to get to a hospital," she said firmly. "The inhaler isn't providing enough relief." Noah looked toward the pastor, who shook his head. "Ambulances still can't get through. Roads are washed out all over the city." A quick check of his phone showed Noah that service had been partially restored. He tried calling emergency services, but got only a busy signal, the system overwhelmed with calls. Making a decision, he gently lifted Lucas again. "I'm taking him to Goldcrest. They'll have private doctors, medical equipment, whatever he needs." The pastor looked doubtful. "Goldcrest is at least 5 miles from here, and you'll be crossing into Northside. That could be dangerous for someone like you." The unspoken warning was clear, but Noah had no choice. Lucas's health was deteriorating rapidly. "I'll take my chances," Noah replied, wrapping his own jacket around the shivering boy. Outside, the rain had lessened slightly, but the damage was already done. Streets had been transformed into treacherous waterways, debris floating past like bizarre parade floats. Noah cradled Lucas close, promising him they would make it home soon. Meanwhile, at Goldcrest, Stephanie Pierce was making a belated report about her stepson's disappearance. Caroline called nearly an hour ago, she told the security team with practiced concern. "Apparently Lucas wandered off at the mall. We shouldn't alarm Victor unnecessarily, of course. He's in meetings all day." Warren Hayes, the head of security, immediately recognized the implications of her delayed reporting. If anything happened to the Pierce, questions would be asked about why the alert had been so delayed. "I'll dispatch teams immediately, Mrs. Pierce," he said tersely. "And I think Mr. Pierce should be notified now. Stephanie's perfect features arrange themselves into an expression of worry, if you think it's necessary. But do remind him that Lucas tends to wander. I'm sure he's perfectly fine. As Noah carried Lucas toward the wealthiest and most dangerous part of the city for someone of his race, he had no idea that time was running out in more ways than one. The invisible boundary separating Atlanta's working-class neighborhoods from the exclusive North Side community might as well have been a physical wall for young black men like Noah. As he carried Lucas across this unseen border, the atmosphere changed as palpably as the air pressure before a storm. Even in the midst of a natural disaster with emergency sirens still wailing in the distance, Noah felt eyes tracking him from windows and car windshields. The homes here were set farther back from the streets, protected by elaborate landscaping and security systems, many with private generators humming defiantly against the power outages affecting the rest of the city. Noah kept his head down, focusing solely on maintaining his footing in the still flooded streets and monitoring Lucas's labored breathing. The boy had grown alarmingly quiet, conserving his energy, his small body radiating concerning heat despite being soaked. They had gone perhaps half a mile into Northside when a black SUV with neighborhood security emblazoned on its side slowed alongside them. The window rolled down, revealing a middle-aged white man in a uniform styled to resemble police attire. "Stop right there," the man called out. "This is a closed neighborhood during the emergency." Noah paused, shifting Lucas slightly in his arms. "This boy needs medical help. I'm taking him home to Goldcrest." The security officer's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Goldcrest? You expect me to believe that?" Before Noah could respond, Lucas lifted his head. "My daddy is Victor Pierce," he said, his voice weak but clear. "I got lost. Noah's helping me." The mention of the Pierce name caused a visible reaction, but the security officer remained skeptical. "Stay where you are," he ordered, speaking into his radio as he pulled out a phone and began taking photos of Noah and Lucas. Noah realized with a sinking feeling that the man was calling the police. "Sir, please," Noah said urgently. "He needs medical attention. He has severe asthma." "That's for the proper authorities to determine," the man replied coldly. Noah made a split-second decision. Lucas couldn't afford any more delays. With a quick hold on tight to the boy, Noah turned and hurried down a side street, moving as fast as he dared through the receding floodwaters. Behind them, he heard the security officer shouting and the SUV's engine revving, but the vehicle couldn't follow through the narrower, still partially flooded lane Noah had chosen. Noah knew he had just made his situation exponentially worse. Now he would be reported not just as suspicious, but as fleeing with a white child. But Lucas's increasingly labored breathing left him no choice. The boy's need for medical attention outweighed all other concerns. They emerged onto another wide residential street, this one blocked by orange emergency barriers and a police checkpoint where officers were turning away non-residents from entering the area. Noah ducked behind a large hedge before they could be spotted, setting Lucas down momentarily to catch his breath and reassess their route. "Are we almost home?" Lucas asked, leaning heavily against Noah. "Not yet," Noah admitted. "There are some roadblocks we need to get around." He checked his phone again. Still no service. The storm had crippled the cellular network across the city. Noah Lucas said hesitantly, "Are you afraid of the police?" The directness of the question caught Noah off guard. "Why do you ask that?" "Because your heart beats really fast when they come near us, and you sound different when you talk to them." Noah considered how to answer honestly without frightening the child. "Sometimes people judge others based on how they look, not who they really are," he explained carefully. "Because of the color of my skin, some people, including some police officers, might think I'm dangerous even when I'm just trying to help." Lucas was quiet for a moment, digesting this. "Stephanie says black people are always looking for handouts," he said finally, clearly repeating something he'd heard. "And Daddy's lawyer said they're just waiting to sue for discrimination when they don't get jobs because they're not qualified." The innocent repetition of these deeply prejudiced views stung Noah deeply, but he recognized that Lucas was simply parroting the toxic perspectives he'd been exposed to. Lucas, Noah said gently, "People are just people. Some are kind, some aren't. Skin color doesn't determine someone's character or abilities." Would someone who was just looking for handouts carry you through a flood to get you home safely? Lucas considered this, then shook his head. I guess not. Exactly, Noah said. It's important to judge people by what they do, not how they look or where they come from. He checked around the hedge, noting a wooded area that might provide a less exposed route. Come on, we need to keep moving. I think I see a better way. Noah carried Lucas through a stretch of woods that separated two exclusive subdivisions, trying to avoid the main roads where police and neighborhood security would be watching for them. The going was slower here, with fallen branches and uneven ground, but it kept them hidden from suspicious eyes. As they traveled, Lucas continued their conversation, innocently revealing more about the prejudiced environment he was being raised in. Warren doesn't let the delivery people come to the door if they're black, he confided. They have to leave packages at the gate. He says it's for security. Noah swallowed his anger, focusing instead on educating the boy. Does he do the same with white delivery people, he asked. Lucas thought about it. No, I don't think so. That's called discrimination, Noah explained. Treating people differently just because of their race. Oh, Lucas said, sounding troubled. That's not fair, is it? No, it's not, Noah agreed. And it hurts people. It makes it harder for them to get jobs, homes, education, all sorts of important things. The conversation paused as they reached a particularly flooded section where water still reached Noah's waist. He carefully lifted Lucas onto his shoulders. Hold on tight, he instructed. I'm going to make something to help us float across. Using fallen branches and his own backpack, Noah fashioned a makeshift float that would at least keep Lucas above water if Noah lost his footing. The boy seemed fascinated by Noah's resourcefulness. How did you learn to do that, he asked as Noah secured him onto the crude raft. Necessity, Noah replied simply. When you don't have much, you learn to work with what you have. As they navigated the deepest part of the floodwaters, Lucas continued their earlier conversation. Noah. Are there really people who won't hire someone just because they're black? Yes, Noah confirmed. It happens a lot, even though it's against the law. But that's stupid, Lucas declared with the straightforward logic of a child. If someone can do the job, why would their skin color matter? That's exactly right, Noah agreed, feeling a glimmer of hope that perhaps this young boy from a privileged, prejudiced household could still develop a more just worldview. Meanwhile, at Goldcrest, Warren Hayes had organized search parties consisting of security personnel and police officers with connections to the Pierce family. Victor Pierce had finally been notified of his son's disappearance and had returned from his downtown office, his fury directed primarily at Caroline, the nanny who had been summarily fired. Find my son, he had ordered Hayes. Whatever it takes. But Hayes's search strategy reflected his own biases. He directed teams to check shopping centers, restaurants, and other public buildings, dismissing suggestions that Lucas might have wandered into less affluent neighborhoods. The boy's blind, not stupid, Hayes had scoffed. Besides, no one from those areas would bring him back, they'd be looking for a payday. As a result, the search teams were focusing in exactly the wrong areas, while Noah and Lucas struggled closer to Goldcrest with each passing minute. Victor Pierce paced the marble floors of his mansion's grand foyer, phone pressed to his ear, as he coordinated with his corporate PR team. They were already preparing statements, in case the media got hold of the story, carefully crafting language that would paint the Pierce family as victims rather than negligent caretakers. Only occasionally did Victor's thoughts turn to his son's well-being, and even then they were colored by practicality rather than paternal love. Lucas was his heir, his legacy. Without the boy, the Pierce fortune would eventually pass to his stepmother and her family, a scenario Victor found unacceptable. Stephanie maintained a performance of distress, dabbing at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief whenever Victor looked her way. Privately, she was already calculating how Lucas's disappearance might ultimately benefit her position. As the afternoon wore on and the storm gradually began to subside, Victor finally authorized something he'd been reluctant to do: a public alert with a substantial reward for information leading to Lucas's safe return. The amount, $100,000, suggested the depth of the Pierce resources, but to many observing the unfolding situation, it also placed a disturbing price tag on the value of a lost child. For Noah and Lucas, now less than 2 miles from Goldcrest, but facing increasingly hostile territory. That reward would soon transform an already dangerous situation into something potentially deadly. After nearly 8 grueling hours of navigating floodwaters, evading authorities, and carrying Lucas through increasingly hostile territory, Noah finally caught sight of Goldcrest looming on the hill ahead. Even from a distance, the estate was intimidating, a sprawling mansion surrounded by immaculately landscaped grounds, all enclosed by a wrought iron fence that managed to be both decorative and forbidding. Floodlights illuminated the property despite the ongoing power outages, in much of the city evidence of backup generators, and the Pierce family's insulation from inconveniences that affected ordinary citizens. Noah paused behind a cluster of trees, setting Lucas down gently to rest his aching arms and assess the situation. The boy's condition had deteriorated alarmingly over the past hour, his breathing shallow and rapid, his skin hot with fever. "Lucas," Noah said softly, "we're almost there. I can see your house." Lucas nodded weakly, too exhausted to speak. Noah's own condition wasn't much better. His clothes were soaked and muddy, his muscles screaming from carrying Lucas for miles, and cuts on his feet and legs stung from wading through contaminated floodwaters. But physical discomfort was the least of his concerns. The closer they got to Goldcrest, the greater the danger became for Noah. He had no illusions about how his presence would be interpreted, a young black man appearing with a billionaire's missing son. Even with Lucas's testimony, Noah knew he would likely face suspicion accusations, possibly even violence. What he didn't know was that they were already being watched. The moment they had emerged from the tree line, Goldcrest's sophisticated security cameras had captured them. Inside the mansion's surveillance room, Warren Hayes leaned forward in his chair, eyes narrowing at the monitors. "Alert the team," he barked to his assistant. "We've got a male subject with what appears to be the boy on the southeast approach." He reached for his sidearm, checking it before heading toward the door. Armed response protocol. The subject should be considered dangerous. Within minutes, the quiet efficiency of Goldcrest's security apparatus sprang into action. Guards took up positions along the fence line, while others moved silently through the gardens, converging on the location where Noah and Lucas were approaching. Noah, unaware of the mobilization occurring around them, helped Lucas to his feet. "Just a little further," he encouraged. "Let's get you home." They made their way slowly toward the main gate, Lucas leaning heavily against Noah. As they approached the intercom mounted on a stone pillar, Noah felt a prickling sensation on the back of his neck, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. Before he could press the call button, floodlights suddenly blazed directly onto them, momentarily blinding Noah. "Freeze hands, where we can see them." The command came from multiple directions as security personnel emerged from concealed positions, weapons drawn, and aimed at Noah. "Move away from the boy," one shouted. "On the ground now," ordered another. Lucas, startled and confused by the shouting, clutched Noah's leg. "What's happening?" he cried, his voice tight with fear. "It's okay," Noah said, trying to keep his voice calm despite his racing heart. "We're at your home. These are your security guards." He raised his hands slowly, painfully aware of how many guns were pointed at him. "My name is Noah Jackson," he called out clearly. "I found Lucas lost during the storm. He needs medical attention immediately. He has severe asthma, and he's having trouble breathing." The guards remained in position, weapons trained unwaveringly on Noah's chest. One of them spoke into a radio, and moments later the gate began to slide open. Through it strode Warren Hayes, his expression hard as he approached with his hand resting on his holstered weapon. "Step away from the boy," Hayes ordered. "Lucas," Noah said gently, "these people work for your dad. They're going to help you now." But Lucas shook his head, frantically tightening his grip on Noah's leg. "No, Noah, help me. Don't hurt him." Hayes ignored the child's protests, gesturing to two guards who moved forward to separate them. As they reached for Lucas, Noah instinctively put a protective hand on the boy's shoulder, a motion that Hayes interpreted as threatening. "Hands up," he barked, drawing his weapon fully. The situation was deteriorating rapidly when a commanding voice cut through the tension. "What the hell is going on here?" Victor Pierce pushed his way through the security personnel, his attention fixing immediately on his son. "Lucas." For a moment, relief flickered across the billionaire's face, quickly replaced by suspicious anger as his gaze shifted to Noah. "Who are you? What have you done with my son?" Before Noah could answer, Lucas broke away from the guards who had managed to separate him from Noah, stumbling toward the sound of his father's voice. "Daddy, Noah helped me. I got lost, and he carried me home. Don't let them hurt him." Victor caught his son kneeling to check him over. The boy's labored breathing and feverish skin immediately registered. "He needs a doctor," Noah said, still holding his hands visible. "He's been having asthma attacks. His inhaler isn't helping anymore." Victor looked up sharply. "You expect me to believe you've been helping him? More likely you took him and changed your mind about whatever you were planning." Noah shook his head. "Sir, I found him alone near Peachtree Mall during the storm. He was lost and in danger. I've spent the entire day trying to get him home safely." Lucas tugged at his father's sleeve. "It's true, Daddy, Noah carried me through the water. He kept me safe from the flood. He's my friend." Victor's expression remained skeptical, but Lucas's worsening condition demanded immediate attention. "Get the doctor," he ordered one of the staff members who hurried toward the house. To Hayes, he said, "Secure him," with a nod toward Noah. "But don't hurt him until we sort this out." As Noah was being handcuffed, Lucas suddenly went limp in his father's arms, his breathing becoming frighteningly shallow. "Dad," he gasped, "can't breathe." The boy's eyes rolled back as he began to convulse. Lucas Victor cried in alarm. The private physician was still minutes away. Noah, seeing Lucas in acute respiratory distress, instinctively moved to help despite his restraints. "He needs his rescue inhaler," and to be in recovery position, he called out, "I have emergency training." One of the guards roughly pushed Noah back. "Stay where you are." In the confusion, Lucas's condition worsened dramatically. As paramedics finally arrived running from the house with emergency equipment, the boy went completely still. Lucas Noah shouted, struggling against his restraints. "Turn him on his side. Clear his airway." The medical team worked frantically, administering emergency medication and oxygen. As they stabilized Lucas enough to transfer him to a stretcher, the boy briefly regained consciousness, his hand reaching out. "Noah," he called weakly. "Where's Noah?" But Noah was already being marched away, hands cuffed behind his back, guided roughly toward a security building at the edge of the property. Victor Pierce watched, torn between attending to his son and dealing with the young man who had brought him home. Ultimately, he followed the medical team, carrying Lucas, leaving Noah in Hayes' custody. Inside the security office, Noah was pushed into a chair, still handcuffed, facing an uncertain fate. Hayes stood over him, radiating hostility. "You picked the wrong family to target," he said menacingly. "Whatever your game was, it's over now." Noah looked up at him steadily. "I was just trying to help a lost child," he said. "That's all this ever was." Hayes snorted in disbelief. "Right. And I'm sure you had no idea who he was or how much his family is worth." The implication was clear. Hayes believed Noah had recognized Lucas as the Pierce heir and had some kind of exploitation or ransom scheme in mind. What would you do if faced with such deep-rooted prejudice? Comment number 1, if you believe Noah should continue trying to explain himself, or number 2, if you think he should remain silent until he has legal representation. Like this video if you believe in standing up for truth, even when the world is against you, and subscribe to find out what happens next in this powerful story. Will anyone believe Noah's account of what happened? Will Lucas recover and be able to tell his side of the story? The truth is about to be tested against the power of wealth and privilege. Detective Sandra Morrison arrived at Goldcrest 90 minutes after Noah had been detained. She was a veteran of the Atlanta Police Department's Major Crimes Division with 20 years of experience and a reputation for thoroughness that made her respected, if not always liked, by her colleagues. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a city in disarray. Emergency services stretched thin, and Morrison in a foul mood after navigating flooded streets and downed power lines to reach the Pierce estate. She found Noah sitting alone in a Spartan interview room within the security building, still, in his wet clothes, hands cuffed in front of him. His face was bruised, though whether from the day's ordeal or rougher handling after his detention was unclear. Noah Jackson Morrison said, reading from her notepad as she sat across from him. 17. No fixed address. She looked up, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp. Want to tell me what happened today? Noah straightened in his chair, wincing slightly. I found Lucas Pierce lost during the storm. He was alone, confused, and the area was starting to flood. I helped him use his inhaler when he had an asthma attack, then tried to bring him home. Quite the good Samaritan, Morrison remarked, her tone making it clear she wasn't convinced. And you just happened to find the son of one of the richest men in Atlanta. I didn't know who he was at first, Noah explained. I just saw a lost child in danger. When I realized he was blind and learned his name, I knew I needed to get him home. So you carried a child across the city through dangerous flood conditions, passing multiple emergency shelters and authorities who could have helped, Morrison summarized skeptically. Rather than say taking him to police or calling emergency services, I tried calling emergency services, Noah countered. The networks were down, and when we did encounter a police officer, he let us continue because ambulances couldn't get through the flooded streets. He described his interaction with Officer Benson, providing the badge number he'd been given. Lucas needed medical help, his asthma was getting worse. Morrison made a note, then continued her questioning. You expect me to believe that your only motivation was helping this child, a wealthy white child. No thoughts about rewards or recognition. The accusation stung, but Noah kept his voice steady. I wasn't thinking about rewards. I was thinking about a scared, sick kid who needed help. Further discussion was interrupted by a knock at the door. A uniformed officer entered and handed Morrison a note. She read it, her expression changing subtly. Wait here, she instructed Noah, as if he had a choice in the matter. Outside the room, Morrison found Warren Hayes waiting impatiently. We've got footage from the mall security cameras, he informed her, leading her to a computer. Shows the suspect following the Pierce boy. The grainy video showed Lucas wandering alone, then Noah appearing in frame shortly after. Hayes froze the image. See? He targeted the boy. Morrison studied the footage carefully. Play it from the beginning again before the boy appears. Hayes complied reluctantly. The extended footage revealed a different story. Noah had been across the street, noticed Lucas wandering dangerously close to traffic, and only approached after the boy was clearly in distress. Doesn't look like targeting to me, Morrison observed. Looks like he noticed a blind child in danger. Hayes scowled. You're missing the point. This kid is homeless, probably looking for an angle. Mr. Pierce is prepared to press charges for kidnapping. Morrison raised an eyebrow. Based on what evidence? From what I'm seeing, the evidence supports Jackson's story. Their debate was interrupted by another security staff member. Miss Robinson is at the gate demanding to see Noah Jackson. Says she's his social worker. Meanwhile, at the main house, doctors were treating Lucas in a fully equipped medical suite that most hospitals would envy. The boy's condition had stabilized, but he was still weak and frightened, repeatedly asking for Noah. Victor Pierce stood in the doorway watching, as specialists monitored his son's vitals. Stephanie hovered nearby, maintaining her performance of concerned stepmother while subtly urging Victor to press charges against that delinquent. He clearly took advantage of Lucas's condition, she insisted. We should make an example of him. Victor wasn't entirely convinced. Something in his son's desperate defense of the teenager had given him pause. Lucas had never shown such emotional attachment to anyone before, not even to Victor himself. A soft knock on the doorframe interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Ellington, Lucas's primary physician, gestured for Victor to step outside. He's going to be fine, the doctor assured him. But he's quite distressed about the young man who brought him home. He's refusing to take his medication unless he can see him, Victor frowned. That's ridiculous. Lucas doesn't need to see the person who put him in danger in the first place. Dr. Ellington looked uncomfortable. With all due respect, Mr. Pierce, your son's version of events differs significantly from what you've described. He insists this young man saved his life multiple times today. Before Victor could respond, his phone rang a call from Warren Hayes. The security chief's news was unwelcome. The detective was questioning their version of events, and a social worker had arrived, advocating for Jackson. She's causing a scene, Hayes reported, demanding to see him and threatening media involvement. At the security gate, Pauline Robinson stood her ground despite the rain and the dismissive treatment from the guards. At 68, with 4 decades of experience advocating for disadvantaged youth, she was not easily intimidated. "That boy has been under my supervision for months," she informed the guards firmly. "He's a minor being held without representation. Either you let me see him, or the next call I make is to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution." The threat of media attention was the magic key. Within minutes, she was escorted to the security building, where she immediately demanded to see Noah. Detective Morrison, recognizing the value of an independent witness familiar with Noah, allowed the meeting. The reunion was emotional, with Miss Robinson examining Noah's bruises with growing indignation. "Did they do this to you?" she demanded. Noah shook his head. "Most of it happened during the flood." "I'm okay, Miss Robinson." He explained what had happened, Miss Robinson listening intently. "I'm not surprised you helped that child," she said when he finished. "But I am worried about what these people might do to you." Their conversation was cut short when Morrison returned. "Miss Robinson, I'd like to speak with you privately." Outside, Morrison got straight to the point. "Tell me about Noah Jackson." Miss Robinson didn't hesitate. "Noah is one of the brightest, most compassionate young people I've ever worked with. Straight-A student before his grandmother died, and his uncle kicked him out. He's been homeless for 3 months, but he still comes to the community center every day, helps younger kids with homework, refuses to get involved with gangs or drugs, despite his circumstances." As she spoke, another officer approached with a medical report. Morrison reviewed it quickly, her eyebrows rising. The examination of Noah showed multiple injuries consistent with his story: abrasions on his shoulders, from carrying Lucas cuts and scrapes on his legs, from wading through flood debris, and signs of exhaustion and exposure entirely. Consistent with someone who had been helping others rather than thinking of his own safety. The case was taking a turn that the Pierce family might not like. Inside the mansion, Lucas had finally fallen asleep, but only after extracting a promise from his father that Noah wouldn't be harmed. Victor sat by his son's bedside, troubled by the growing evidence that contradicted his assumptions. The media had already picked up the story, with early reports framing it as "homeless teen apprehended with billionaire's son during storm." Victor's PR team was pushing for a statement that would protect the family image regardless of the truth. Yet the truth was becoming increasingly difficult to deny. A soft knock at the door heralded his assistant Michael. "Sir, there's something you need to see." Michael handed him a tablet displaying a social media video that was rapidly going viral. A bystander had captured footage of Noah carrying Lucas through chest-deep water earlier that day, the teenager clearly protecting the child's head above the flood while struggling against the current. The timestamp and location matched Noah's account perfectly. Victor stared at the video, his carefully constructed narrative crumbling. "There's more, sir," Michael added hesitantly. "Detective Morrison is requesting to speak with Lucas when he wakes up, and Miss Robinson, the social worker, is threatening to go public with accusations of racial profiling if Noah isn't released immediately." The walls were closing in on Victor Pierce's version of events. He had built his empire on controlling the narrative, on ensuring that his perspective was the only one that mattered. Now that control was slipping away, and the truth was something he hadn't expected. A homeless black teenager had indeed saved his son's life, asking nothing in return, and had been rewarded with suspicion, detention, and accusations. The realization was uncomfortable for a man unaccustomed to questioning his own assumptions. As reports of Noah's heroism began spreading across social media and news outlets, a small protest formed outside the Goldcrest gates. Community members from Southside, led by Miss Robinson's colleagues, demanded Noah's release and recognition of his actions. Signs reading, "Heroes don't have zip codes" and "Justice for Noah" appeared on live news broadcasts, creating a public relations nightmare for Pierce Innovations, already struggling with discrimination allegations. Inside the security building, Detective Morrison had reached her conclusion. There was no evidence to support kidnapping charges against Noah, and substantial evidence supporting his account of helping Lucas. She informed Warren Hayes of her findings, recommending Noah's immediate release. Hayes, still clinging to his suspicions, refused to accept her assessment. "Mr. Endai, Pierce will want to press charges regardless, he insisted. The boy was missing for hours before this kid brought him here. That's not how the law works, Morrison responded coolly. I need evidence of a crime, and there isn't any. What I do have is evidence of heroism during a natural disaster. Their standoff was interrupted by an unexpected development. A nurse from the main house arrived carrying a cell phone. Lucas Pierce recorded something he wants everyone to hear, she explained, pressing play on the device. Lucas's voice, though weak, was clear and determined as he recounted every detail of his ordeal, getting separated from his nanny Noah, finding him and helping with his inhaler, carrying him through dangerous floodwaters, protecting him from suspicious police and security personnel, and finally bringing him safely home despite facing prejudice and danger at every turn. Noah is my friend, the recording concluded. He saved me when everyone else just saw a blind kid in their way. He's the bravest person I know, and if you hurt him, you're the bad guys, not him. The recording changed everything. Morrison ordered Noah's immediate release over Hayes's objections. Miss Robinson stood proudly at Noah's side as his handcuffs were removed, her arm around his shoulders as they prepared to leave the estate. But their departure was halted by the arrival of Victor Pierce himself, who had listened to his son's recording and finally confronted the truth of his own prejudice. The confrontation that followed would determine not just Noah's fate, but potentially the future of two worlds that had collided in the most unexpected way. The morning after the storm broke clear and bright, the sun illuminating a city transformed by floodwaters and shared humanity. Outside the police station where Noah had been briefly processed before being released without charges, a crowd had gathered. What had begun as a small protest organized by Mrs. Robinson's community center colleagues had swollen into a significant demonstration with participants from both South Side and, surprisingly, some of Atlanta's more affluent neighborhoods. News vans lined the street, reporters delivering live updates on what had now been dubbed the Goldcrest Rescue by local media. Noah emerged from the station with Miss Possis Robinson at his side, blinking in the sudden sunlight and looking overwhelmed by the attention. Despite being cleared of any wrongdoing, the experience had left its mark. The lingering trauma of being treated like a criminal for an act of compassion was etched in the shadows beneath his eyes and the wariness in his posture. A cheer went up from the crowd when they spotted him, signs waving with messages of support and gratitude. Noah raised a hesitant hand in acknowledgement, unused to being visible after so long being overlooked. You don't have to talk to them if you don't want to, Miss Robinson told him quietly. We can go straight to the community center. Noah shook his head. I should say something. For kids like me who never get the benefit of the doubt. The press swarmed forward, microphones thrust toward him as questions overlapped in a cacophony of curiosity. One reporter broke through the noise, her questions silencing the others. Noah, after everything you've been through, would you do it again? Would you still help Lucas Pierce, knowing how you'd be treated? Noah didn't hesitate. Yes, because Lucas isn't his family name or his father's money. He's just a kid who needed help. Anyone would have done the same. But everyone present knew that wasn't true. Many would have walked past assuming someone else would help or fearing the very suspicion Noah had faced. His simple act of humanity had exposed uncomfortable truths about the city's racial and economic divides. Across town at Pierce Tower, Victor Pierce was facing a different kind of scrutiny. The company's stock had dropped 8 points overnight as video of Noah's detention spread across social media, accompanied by reminders of the racial discrimination lawsuit the company was already facing. The board of directors had called an emergency meeting, and Victor found himself in the unusual position of defending his actions to people he normally controlled. The situation was mishandled, he admitted, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. But we're taking steps to rectify it. Rectify it, how demanded Barbara Chen, one of the few board members who regularly challenged him. The damage to our reputation is severe. We're being painted as privileged racists who punished a homeless teenager for saving your son's life. Victor bristled at her bluntness, but couldn't dispute the accuracy. I've issued a public apology and established a scholarship fund for underprivileged youth, he replied. And I've personally apologized to Mr. Jackson. This last claim was stretching the truth. Victor had attempted to speak with Noah at the police station, but Miss Robinson had intervened, declaring that her charge needed rest, not performative apologies. The truth was that Victor Pierce, master of the universe in his corporate domain, had been shaken to his core by the events of the past 24 hours. Lucas's recorded testimony had forced him to confront his own prejudices, the automatic assumption that Noah must have had criminal intentions, the dismissal of evidence supporting the teenager's heroism, the ease with which he had been prepared to see Noah punished rather than thanked. Back at Goldcrest, Stephanie Pierce was engaged in damage control of a different sort. With Victor at the emergency board meeting, she had taken the opportunity to enter Warren Hayes' security office, her designer heels clicking purposefully on the polished concrete floor. "We need to discuss our strategy," she told the security chief carefully, closing the door behind her. "Victor is going soft. That recording has him questioning everything." Hayes looked up from his computer where he had been editing security footage to remove the more damning evidence of Noah's mistreatment. "The boy is a liability," he agreed. "He's got everyone believing he's some kind of saint." Stephanie's perfect features arranged themselves into a calculating expression. "We need insurance in case this escalates further. Something to discredit Jackson if necessary." Their conspiracy was interrupted by a knock at the door. One of the junior security officers entered looking uncomfortable. "Ma'am, there's something you should know. The boy Noah's backpack. There's something interesting in it." The backpack had been confiscated when Noah was detained and hadn't yet been returned. The officer produced a tattered notebook, opening it to reveal detailed architectural sketches. "Kid's got talent," the officer remarked, showing pages of building designs, community centers, affordable housing concepts, all drawn with remarkable skill and vision. Stephanie's eyes narrowed as she saw an opportunity. "Leave that with me," she instructed. "I'll make sure Mr. Pierce sees it." When the officer left, she turned to Hayes. "We may have found our leverage. Plant something in this backpack, something that would justify our suspicions. Drugs would be too obvious." Hayes understood immediately. "I can have something arranged, a stolen item, perhaps something valuable from the house that went missing during the confusion." Stephanie smiled coldly. "Perfect. We'll only use it if absolutely necessary, of course." What neither of them realized was that their conversation had been overheard. The junior officer, troubled by what he was witnessing, had left his body camera running a new policy implemented after previous security incidents at Goldcrest. The footage was automatically uploading to a secure server that even Hayes couldn't access without authorization. Meanwhile, at Atlanta Metropolitan Hospital, where Lucas had been transferred for observation, the young boy was refusing to cooperate with doctors until he could speak with Noah. "I want to see my friend," he insisted, pushing away the respiratory therapist trying to administer his treatment. Dad promised he wouldn't let anything bad happen to Noah. Dr. Chen, the pediatric pulmonologist overseeing Lucas's care, had finally called Victor directly. "Your son's condition could deteriorate if he continues refusing treatment," she explained. "He's extremely agitated about the welfare of the young man who rescued him." Victor, already dealing with the board crisis, felt the weight of his poor decisions compound. "Tell him Noah is safe," he instructed. "Tell him I'm personally making sure Noah is being taken care of." But Lucas, despite his young age and visual impairment, had developed a keen sense for when adults were placating him. "I want proof," he demanded. "I want to talk to Noah myself." At the Southside Community Center, Miss Problich speaks. Robinson had brought Noah to her office where she was helping him document everything that had happened. "This isn't just about clearing your name," she explained. "It's about establishing a record of how quickly people jump to the worst conclusions about you because of your race and economic status." Noah nodded tiredly, the adrenaline of the past 24 hours finally wearing off. "I just want to make sure Lucas is okay," he said, "and then maybe find a place to sleep for a few hours." His concern for the child who had been the catalyst for his ordeal was genuine. Despite everything, Noah had formed a bond with Lucas, recognizing in the isolated blind boy another kind of invisibility different from his own but no less real. Miss Robinson was about to respond when her office phone rang. The call was brief, but her expression changed from concern to cautious optimism as she listened. That was Dr. Chen from Metropolitan Hospital, she told Noah after hanging up. Lucas is refusing treatment until he can verify you're safe. They're asking if you'd be willing to speak with him. Noah didn't hesitate. Of course. The call was arranged, and when Lucas heard Noah's voice, his relief was palpable even over the phone line. "You're really okay, they didn't hurt you?" he asked anxiously. "I'm fine, Lucas," Noah assured him. "Miss Robinson is taking good care of me." "How are you feeling? Better now," Lucas admitted. "The doctors say I can go home tomorrow, if my breathing stays good." "Will you come visit me?" The innocent question highlighted the complexity of their situation, the unlikely friendship between a homeless black teenager and the blind son of a billionaire bridging worlds that rarely intersected in any meaningful way. "We'll see," Noah replied, carefully, not wanting to make promises he couldn't keep. "Focus on getting better first." "Okay." After the call ended, Miss Prophet. Robinson received another unexpected communication. A local news station had discovered Noah's sketchbook through a leak from Goldcrest Security and wanted to interview him about his architectural ambitions. The story was evolving from a simple rescue to a deeper examination of wasted potential and systemic barriers. "You don't have to do this," Miss Robinson reminded Noah. "You've been through enough." But Noah saw an opportunity to shift the narrative. "Maybe people need to see that kids like me have dreams too," he said. "That we're more than just statistics or stereotypes." The interview conducted at the community center with Miss Robinson present revealed Noah's remarkable talent and vision to the public. His articulate descriptions of sustainable community spaces designed to bridge economic divides resonated with viewers, creating another wave of support and outrage at a system that had left such a gifted young person homeless and vulnerable. By evening, the interview had gone viral, sharing space on social media with Lucas's recorded testimony and the flood rescue footage. The combined narrative was powerful. A homeless black teenager with extraordinary talent and character, risking everything to save a privileged white child who in turn had the moral clarity to recognize and defend his rescuer. Public pressure on Pierce Innovations mounted with calls for concrete action beyond symbolic gestures. Victor Pierce, watching the interview from his office at Pierce Tower, felt something shift inside him. The teenager on screen, speaking passionately about creating spaces where people from all backgrounds could come together in dignity, bore no resemblance to the dangerous predator Victor had initially assumed him to be. The realization was profoundly uncomfortable, forcing Victor to confront not just this single misjudgment, but a lifetime of similar assumptions that had gone unexamined. When his phone rang with a call from the hospital, Victor expected more complications. Instead, Dr. Chen delivered surprising news. "Your son has made a request," she informed him. "He wants to record a complete testimony about everything that happened yesterday. He says it's important that everyone knows the truth." Victor hesitated, torn between his instinct to control the narrative and his growing awareness of how that instinct had led him astray. "Put him on," he said finally. Lucas's voice came through stronger than it had been earlier. "Dad, I need to tell the whole story. About Noah, about what happened, about what I learned. Will you help me?" In that moment, faced with his son's moral clarity, Victor Pierce made a choice that would set in motion the final act of a story that had begun with a chance encounter in a storm. "Yes," he told his son, "I'll help you tell the truth, all of it." As night fell over Atlanta, the city still dealing with the storm's aftermath, Noah finally allowed himself to rest on a cot in the community center's emergency shelter. He had no idea that across town, Lucas Pierce was recording a complete account of their journey together, or that Stephanie and Hayes were conspiring to discredit him if necessary, or that Victor Pierce was experiencing a profound reassessment of values that would soon impact all their lives. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and possibilities as the collision of their different worlds continued to send ripples through the established order of things. 1 month after the storm that changed everything, Noah Jackson stood nervously in the gleaming lobby of Pierce Tower, clutching a portfolio containing his latest architectural designs. The security guard behind the desk smiled as he approached. "Morning, Noah. Go right up, they're expecting you." This simple courtesy, the use of his name, the absence of suspicion in the guard's eyes, still felt surreal after years of being treated as inherently suspicious in such spaces. The elevator carried him swiftly to the 40th floor, where Victor Pierce's executive suite occupied half the available space. The receptionist, another familiar face by now, waved him through without hesitation. "They're in the conference room. Lucas has been asking for you all morning." Noah found them reviewing architectural models for the new Pierce Community Innovation Center, a $15 million project that would bring cutting-edge technology education to Southside. Lucas sat beside his father, fingers moving carefully over the textured surface of a scale model, his face lighting up at the sound of Noah's footsteps. "Noah, Dad's letting me help choose the materials for the sensory garden. I think the water feature should be here where everyone can hear it when they enter." Noah smiled, setting his portfolio on the conference table. "That's a great idea. The sound would help with orientation for visually impaired visitors." The easy interaction between the three of them would have been unimaginable just weeks earlier. The transformation had begun with Lucas's full testimony, which had not only cleared Noah's name, but had sparked a profound reckoning within Victor Pierce. Forced to confront his prejudices through his son's eyes, Victor had been shaken to his core. The charges against Noah had been formally dropped after overwhelming evidence and public pressure made any other outcome untenable. The video of Noah carrying Lucas through chest-deep floodwaters, the medical evidence of injuries sustained while protecting the child, and Lucas's unwavering account, had created a narrative impossible to dispute. But Victor Pierce had gone beyond simply acknowledging his mistake. Perhaps driven by the realization of how close his own prejudice had come to destroying an innocent young life, perhaps influenced by his son's unexpected moral clarity, Victor had taken steps that surprised even those who knew him best. The first had been a public apology, not the carefully crafted PR statement his team had prepared, but a raw, honest acknowledgement of how quickly he had assumed the worst about Noah, based solely on race and economic status. The second had been the establishment of the Pierce Foundation for Equal Opportunity, with an initial endowment of $50 million dedicated to addressing systemic barriers facing disadvantaged youth. The third, and most surprising to many, had been his personal involvement in ensuring that Noah received the opportunities his talent deserved. Upon discovering Noah's architectural abilities through the sketchbook that Stephanie had intended to use against him, Victor had arranged for Noah to receive housing, educational support, and a paid internship at Pierce Innovation's Architectural Division. "Your designs for the youth center are impressive," Victor said, now examining the renderings Noah had brought. "The committee wants to move forward with your concept." Noah blinked in surprise. "Really? But there were professional firms competing for this." Victor's expression was wry. "None of them understood the community like you do. None of them incorporated accessibility features that made sense to Lucas. And none of them managed to come in under budget while still delivering everything we asked for." The approval meant more than just professional validation. It meant that Noah's vision for bringing communities together through thoughtfully designed spaces would actually be realized, a dream that had seemed impossible during those long nights in abandoned buildings. Stephanie Pierce had not shared her husband's transformation. The body camera footage revealing her conspiracy with Warren Hayes had been discovered during an internal security audit, leading to Hayes's immediate termination and Stephanie's public humiliation. Currently in the midst of divorce proceedings, she had retreated to her family's estate in Connecticut, her carefully constructed image in tatters. The junior security officer, who had unwittingly captured the evidence, had been promoted, part of Victor's broader overhaul of Goldcrest's security protocols and culture. Ms. Robinson had become a valued advisor to the Pierce Foundation, bringing decades of frontline experience to ensure that resources actually reached those who needed them most. Her no-nonsense approach had initially clashed with the corporate culture at Pierce Innovations, but Victor had quickly recognized the value of her perspective, often deferring to her judgment on community initiatives. Lucas himself had undergone perhaps the most remarkable transformation. Once isolated by both his disability and his family's wealth, he had blossomed in the weeks since the storm. His friendship with Noah had opened new worlds to him, teaching him to navigate spaces and relationships through different senses. The blindness that Stephanie had considered a shameful weakness had become, through Noah's influence, simply another way of experiencing the world with its own unique insights and perspectives. "Noah's teaching me to skateboard," Lucas announced proudly during a break in the meeting. "We practice at the park every Saturday." Victor raised an eyebrow. Skateboarding. With your asthma, once this would have been delivered as a prohibition. Now it was merely a concerned question. "We're careful," Noah assured him. "We don't push too hard, and we always have his medications nearby. But it's good for his balance and spatial awareness." Victor nodded, accepting Noah's expertise in an area he himself didn't fully understand, another significant change. After the meeting concluded, Victor asked Noah to stay behind. "There's something else I wanted to discuss with you," he said once they were alone. "The discrimination lawsuit against Pierce Innovations, we've settled it." Noah nodded, having heard about the case during his time at the company. "That's good news, right?" it is, Victor confirmed. "But more importantly, we've completely revised our hiring and promotion practices. Marcus Johnson, who filed the original complaint, has agreed to return as our new Chief Diversity Officer with real authority to implement changes." He paused, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I wanted your opinion on the new policies before we finalize them." The request for Noah's input symbolized how far they had all come. Noah, once invisible to men like Victor Pierce, was now valued not just for his architectural talent, but for his perspective and lived experience. The following weekend, Noah and Lucas met at Piedmont Park for their regular skateboarding session. Miss Robinson accompanied them, having become something of a grandmother figure to both boys. She watched from a bench as Noah patiently guided Lucas, helping him feel the subtle shifts in the board's movement, teaching him to trust his other senses when navigating the smooth pavement of the skate area. "Keep your weight centered," Noah instructed, holding Lucas's hands as the younger boy balanced on the stationary board. "Feel how the board responds when you shift slightly." Lucas's face was a study in concentration, but also joy, the pure pleasure of mastering a new skill that many had assumed would be impossible for him. Nearby, other skaters watched with interest, some offering encouraging words, a few, even asking Noah about his techniques for teaching adaptive skating. What had begun as an unusual friendship had rippled outward, changing perceptions and creating new possibilities, not just for Noah and Lucas, but for others who witnessed their connection. Victor Pierce arrived toward the end of their session, having made a point of attending these weekend activities whenever his schedule permitted. He stood slightly apart, watching his son laugh, as Noah demonstrated a simple trick, Lucas tracking the movement through sound and the vibrations he could feel through his feet. "He's doing well, miss," Robinson commented, making room for Victor on the bench. "Both of them are." Victor nodded, his expression reflective. "Noah's been offered a full scholarship to Georgia Tech's architecture program," he said, "starting next fall." Miss Robinson smiled. "I know. He told me yesterday. He's considering commuting so he can still work with the younger kids at the center, 3 afternoons a week." This commitment to giving back despite his own improved circumstances was quintessentially Noah recognizing his responsibility to help others as he had been helped. "The community center we're building," Victor said after a moment, "I'd like to name it after your sister. Noah told me she was the one who first noticed his talent for design." Miss Robinson's eyes widened in surprise. Her sister Angela had run the community arts program for 20 years before her death from cancer the previous year. The suggestion was unexpectedly thoughtful, coming from a man who just months ago wouldn't have given someone like Miss Robinson a moment's consideration. She would have liked it, she said simply. As the afternoon drew to a close, Noah, Lucas, Victor, and Miss Robinson walked together toward the parking area. They made an unusual group: the billionaire, the social worker, the formerly homeless teenager, and the blind child. But their easy interaction suggested something important about the possibilities that existed when people truly saw each other, looking past assumptions and stereotypes to recognize shared humanity. Lucas, holding Noah's hand on one side and his father's on the other, suddenly stopped. "I have an idea," he announced. "Noah should come live at Goldcrest. We have tons of room, and then he could help me every day instead of just weekends." The adults exchanged glances, Noah, looking particularly uncomfortable with the suggestion. "That's very thoughtful," Lucas Victor said carefully. "But Noah has his own place now, and he values his independence." The townhouse Noah currently occupied was owned by the Pierce Foundation, but had been specifically chosen to be close to both the community center and Pierce Tower, allowing him to maintain his connections to his community while pursuing his new opportunities. Besides, Noah added gently, "Part of growing up is learning to stand on your own. I'm nearby whenever you need me, but it's good for both of us to have our own spaces." Lucas considered this, head tilted in the way that indicated he was processing a new concept. "I guess that makes sense," he conceded. "But you'll still come to dinner every Sunday, right?" Noah grinned. "Wouldn't miss it." As they reached the parking area, Victor's driver held the door for Lucas, who gave Noah a quick hug before climbing in. Victor extended his hand to Noah, the handshake that had once been so unimaginable now, a regular part of their interaction. "See you tomorrow at the foundation meeting," Noah nodded. "I'll bring the updated renderings for the playground." After they drove away, Miss Robinson turned to Noah. "Ready to head back? The younger kids at the shelter were hoping you'd help with their science project this evening." Noah smiled. "Definitely. And I wanted to show you some ideas for converting that unused space into a computer lab. I think we could get corporate sponsors for the equipment." As they walked toward Miss Robinson's modest car, Noah glanced back at the park, where he had just spent the afternoon teaching a blind child to skateboard. The symmetry wasn't lost on him. He who had once been unseen was now helping another navigate a world that often overlooked those who were different. Through their unlikely connection, both had gained a new vision, not just of each other, but of what the world could be when people chose to see past their differences to the humanity they shared. What moved you most about Noah and Lucas's journey? Comment below with the moment that touched your heart or made you reflect on your own assumptions. If you believe in the power of seeing beyond stereotypes, hit that like button to spread this message further. Subscribe for more stories that challenge us to look at the world through different eyes and share with someone who needs to be reminded that sometimes the most important things can only be seen with the heart. Thank you for joining me on this powerful journey where courage, compassion, and understanding transcend the boundaries that too often divide us. Until next time, remember that true vision means seeing people for who they really are, not what they appear to be. This story reminds us that prejudice often blinds us to the humanity in others. Noah and Lucas's journey shows how quick judgments based on race and socioeconomic status create invisible barriers that divide our communities. When Victor Pierce first saw Noah with his son, he immediately assumed the worst, not because of evidence, but because of deeply ingrained biases about young black men. Yet through Lucas's innocent eyes, we see the truth character transcends appearance. The transformation in both Noah and Lucas illustrates how meaningful connections can heal divides. Noah, who society had rendered invisible, found purpose in helping someone who experienced a different kind of invisibility through blindness. Their bond created ripples of change, challenging long-held prejudices and opening doors previously closed. This story also highlights how systemic racism operates. Through security protocols that target certain groups, assumptions that criminalize acts of kindness when performed by people of color, and barriers that keep talented individuals, like Noah, from opportunities they deserve. Perhaps most powerfully, it demonstrates that change is possible. Victor's journey from prejudice to understanding shows that even deeply held biases can be overcome when we're willing to see through different eyes and acknowledge our mistakes. True vision means looking beyond stereotypes to recognize our shared humanity. What moment in this story challenged your own thinking about how we judge others based on appearance? Has there been a time when someone saw potential in you that others missed, or when you recognized value in someone society overlooked? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story moved you to reflect on the power of looking beyond stereotypes, please hit that like button to help others find this message. Subscribe for more stories that explore the complexities of human connection across divides that seem insurmountable, and share this video with someone who might need a reminder that compassion can bridge our deepest differences. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Noah and Lucas's story. May it inspire us all to see with our hearts rather than our prejudices, to extend kindness even when it's risky, and to recognize the extraordinary potential in those society too often renders invisible. Together we can build communities where everyone is truly seen,